Bill Nemser. Nice to see such a good crowd here. I'm going to introduce Michelle Landers, Executive Director of the Urban Land Institute, who's been working with Mass Development to help us work on this whole project and this grant. And before we go any further, I'd like to thank Mass Development and Urban Land Institute for doing this. They've been here all day, 8 o'clock. They come and they got right here on time and haven't left, except I think just to go out here. So with that, I'll leave it to Michelle, if you would.
Hi, good evening. My name is Michelle Landers. I'm the Executive Director of ULI Boston, New England. We are a local district council for ULI, the Urban Land Institute, which is a 501c3 research and educational institution. We're a membership organization. We have nearly 50,000 members worldwide. And in our local district council, which covers all of New England except Fairfield County, we have about 1,300 members. Our members are in all aspects of real estate, from planners to developers to architects to engineers. We have members from the public sector, private sector, nonprofit, academic, and we have members who are students all the way up to very experienced and senior leaders. So the experience within the organization is quite diverse. So this is our technical assistance panel, our TAP program. We have been here, and I did come later in the day, so I can't take credit, but the panel has been here all day looking at some of these issues, and we did have some briefing before we came today. So this panel looked at a wide variety of issues from multiple perspectives. Everyone here has donated their time. All these professionals took a day out of the office and are providing some really objective recommendations for your community. Our final deliverable will be a full written report. We have a professional writer here who will take the recommendations as well as the challenges and everything that we identified today, put it into a written report, and that will be available for you within about 12 weeks. And then in the meantime, we will post this presentation, so you're available to access that through our website at boston.uli.org. So just so you know what this program is, this is a local version of a national program that ULI has been conducting since the 1940s. On the national level, the groups of 8 to 10 members will spend 5 days. They'll fly in from anywhere around the country and around the world to provide their expertise, really thorny land use issues. The local district councils have sort of a mini version of that, where we will devote one full day to this operation, which we call a TAP. Nationally, they're called Panel Advisory Services. We've recently just conducted some research. We've done about 40 TAPs in the last 10 or 12 years. 81% of those who responded said that we have helped them move forward with municipal planning and economic development strategies following the TAP. 69% said that they have redeveloped a key municipal asset, and that's everything from a former state-owned hospital or courthouse to a publicly owned parcel of land. And we will be releasing a really in-depth report, so you can see all the communities, mostly around Massachusetts, but all across New England, who have used this process to move forward with their land use issues. And then I'll turn it over to our sponsor today, which is Mass Development. Christine?
Hi everyone, my name is Christine Medora. I'm Vice President, Real Estate Services of Mass Development. Mass Development is the economic development agency for the state. We support all the communities in the Commonwealth through technical assistance or financing. And in this case, we have what we call a real estate technical assistance program, where we do source from communities across the Commonwealth on helping them solve some real estate issues and challenges in their community. And there are different ways that we support communities, and we felt that the Maynard application was a good fit for the TAP program because it was a very intensive one-day exercise where you can get action steps immediately after this process. And we're an agency that's there with you for the long run, so we're not going to go away after today, and there are ways to continue to collaborate, and we're really looking forward to working with the community.
Great. I'm Ed O'Rourke. I'm the co-chair for this panel. Larry Spang had to leave a little early. He went down. He's building a school in Medfield, so we have to go to a town meeting down there. assembled a group based on the challenge that we had in the what's called the basin. Some people call it the basin, some people don't like it to be called the basin. I looked it up and so it could also be called a hollow, but we'll be down south, I guess. But we have a number of panelists that come with expertise in looking at these kind of conditions, and you're going to hear from all of us today. So you asked us a few questions, and these are the three things that we focused on primarily. We certainly look at the whole footprint of the town to see, how the basin is influenced by because it's parking and other conditions as well. So I think we came to some good conclusions that you'll find are in concert with some of the same things you were thinking in your planning, but we feel we have some good staging options and that might help help with your solution. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric Halverson. He's going to talk a little bit about the planning department. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh. Yeah, so anyway, we identified a number of assets and opportunities here. A lot of folks feel that, based on logistics, that Maynard corridor or the basin is the heart of Maynard, and we should be treated as such. We're finding the population is growing, and we need to support those folks and those millennials who are coming in with amenities, and the arts and culture community is growing. There's a lot of surrounding communities that feel that they don't have a town center like Maynard, so Maynard is always attracting folks from outside the community, the surrounding towns, and a lot of people feel and experience that Maynard is a very walkable town. However, there's some challenges in the basin. We want to make sure that we have a safe town, a safe area to park and walk from. We're finding that the bike trail is a tremendous asset. A lot of folks are coming for that, and as many towns, as they grow, they want to have a good work-play community, so you could have a good job here, but you don't have to commute from far away. So, and there's challenges, so that we feel that there's some pedestrian ways that could be better labeled, and some of the assets, particularly the arts community, may have wayfinding and other ways of determining where things are would be better connected to the basin and the parking. And then the retail and restaurant functions could be better found. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric now and continue. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. The area that we were asked to take a look at serves a number of different purposes, as I'm sure you're all aware. But in the briefing materials that were provided by the town, as well as the conversations that we've been having throughout the day, it's pretty clear that, again, first and foremost, this is sort of viewed as a parking asset. So when we were coming in, Bill provided us with a study from it was done in 2018 by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which actually documented the parking conditions, not just in the area that we're studying, but in the downtown as a whole. And I have to tell you, that was a really big resource for us, because a lot of times we go in, there's not, we don't know if there's a lot of parking demand or not, and we sort of have to go by what everybody tells us. But thankfully, we had some information to at least kind of do some checks and balances with what we were hearing and what we were seeing. And interestingly, these two graphs, the one on the top left shows the weekday parking capacity. So when we look at a downtown, typically if your downtown is exceeding at any point in time 85% of the parking capacity or above, you tend to have potentially a parking challenge. You can see the line, that 85% line is the green one at the top. The lines below it are illustrating total parking demand, public on-street and then public off-street in the red. You can see it sort of peaks at 12 during the weekday, pretty typical, especially given the office employment and the number of restaurants down here. Comes down a little bit as people are leaving and then comes up again as people are coming back to the downtown for dinner time or evening events. What's interesting here is that on-street continues to climb while off-street starts to go down. Obviously the area that we're looking at is an off-street asset, so something to keep in mind. Secondly, on the bottom right is the Saturday occupancy. You can see obviously as a weekend, as people are rolling out of bed, your utilization is pretty low, but as the day goes on, utilization continues to climb. One thing we also noticed in doing the tour this morning with town folks was that there are a number of surface parking assets in addition to the on-street assets. Now I realize some of these are privately held, but they do represent opportunities for the town. One thing that I took a look at real quick, and I apologize if you can't see the line there, but if you were to walk from River Street to the study area, it's about 800 feet if you took the sort of convoluted route. It's about a 4-minute walk. If you were to walk from Main and Mill, the farthest portion of their surface parking lot, it's about 2,200 feet or a 9-minute walk. So even whatever happens with the study area over time, there are a lot of other parking assets that are within a relatively close distance to the core portion of downtown.
So, looking at what our recommendations are going to be for this site, we first started to look at some of the existing conditions that are there currently in the basin study area. So you can see here that there's 3 distinct parking areas within the basin itself, served from ingress and egress points from all 3 streets surrounding the study area. So there's kind of one entrance off of Main Street, one off of Summer Street, and currently 2 from Mason Street. These various points of access to the parking area, along with kind of the 3 disparate parking areas, create a poor traffic flow and vehicular circulation through the site. And so then this is coupled with existing conditions for pedestrians that make traveling through the site unsafe and not a great experience. So you can see here the blue lines show where there's kind of the existing sidewalks within the site, and you can see that they're all kind of separated and they don't really connect to the streets very well, or to the parking, or to any of the businesses that surround there. So part of our proposal is to create stronger connections through the site, adding to create better pedestrian safety. So kind of taking these existing sidewalks that are there, linking them up to new pedestrian sidewalks and creating stronger connections to various points within town. So part of this would be, connecting to Main Street and the River Street parking lot, connecting to Mason Street and the rail trail, and then off of Summer Street connecting to the theater and the library, and kind of some of those cultural assets, while also maintaining, at least 2 very distinct areas of parking to kind of create a better traffic flow for the site, then allowing us to activate specific areas within the basin with new activities.
Oh, okay. In order to implement some of the changes in the parking that we are recommending, Christina's told us about a local mechanism that can be implemented here in Maynard, a parking benefits district. It's not a taxing district, but it uses the revenues from parking meters and other parking revenue to fund improvements within the district. In order to do this, and you do have your parking authority already created, which is a great first step, it would be helpful to modernize the parking equipment. And there's a joint purchasing program available through MAPC, through joint procurement with other communities, which can allow you to carefully manage the time limits on different spaces, help with signage, help with enforcement, help with flexible pricing by time of day, etc. You're already funding a wayfinding system, which I think is going to be very welcome in the town. So that again is another very helpful strategy. And part of the overall strategy will involve encouraging use of the River Street lot, particularly for employee parking, that might be displaced eventually out of the basin. And then also to help facilitate public and private sharing of parking space, especially during events, weekends and evenings, and so on. But apart from these overall kind of management strategies, we have some physical concepts and improvements that we're excited to share with you. And Kathy will introduce some of those measures.
And I'll say, it's a little bit difficult without a program on the fly. What we have here, so what we talked about in some of the earlier slides is some of the issues and constraints and the different opportunities we have here on the site. I think everyone is aware, obviously, of the lack of lighting out there, and the lack of really a safe pedestrian way. But for those of us coming into town, and we have, again, talking with everyone this morning, where you have these, the cultural area of the fine arts. Off the site, obviously, is art space, and really trying to bring people down to Main Street and into this space. What really jumped out at us is the real barrier that you have with Veterans Park. The walls along and I'll admit right now, it's in blue and green. That's the area that on one of the last slides here was identified in green as a flexible space. And I will say that really, Barry will go into logistics later. This is a compilation of several different stages of potential planning. But I think what jumped out at us, realizing you can't really hear what I'm saying, was the barrier that the chain link fence and the walls and that really high wall over by the new ramp create to the site. And that combined with the fact that really the parking is not typically totally full, but to look at the lot that's where the parking garage used to be as a flexible space, a flexible event space. It could be treated to be parking most of the time, but on Saturdays, on weekends, during selected events, think of it as for pop-up beer gardens, pop-up art spaces, pop-up just general activity area. There are a lot of communities, say even in New York City, it's treated with creative painting on the pavements, and then bring in some planters, and again, potential kiosks and pavilions that you can bring the art into. And this really would be an opportunity to work with art space and almost use the artwork that they have as breadcrumbs to be connecting all the different parts. We've located, potential sculptures in the middle. String lights. Think of this as an area that during times when it's not really needed to be totally full for parking, it can be very creative. Other aspects that what we're proposing here, let me try this. In the main parking area, a couple of different, what you have in red here, one of the requests was to make this less impervious surface, a bit more work with green infrastructure. The parking areas, again, to be something flexible that could be used for other activities, for what's now the lined parking areas, to install permeable pavement, and could be creative patterns, but so it's not just all asphalt, and that can help with the stormwater management. Over along Babaco's, right now, there's a real weird alignment to the parking there, and in an attempt to, again, help create some more spaces for outdoor cafes, realign that parking a little bit to help create a wider parking lot in that area, or a wider cafe area. And then to reinforce, to create more formal crosswalks and pedestrian ways. What we were surprised by is, we've heard there's not a lot of pedestrian way, but really from Summer Street on down, there actually is a paved sidewalk. It's just not it doesn't jump out at you. Enhancing the lighting and even pedestrian scale lighting with hanging flower pots on it, again, would help to activate the space. And I think back up in the area up near Summer Street, to create a more welcoming route to come down from Summer Street. Right now, you come off of Summer Street, obviously walk down an asphalt pathway and then have to pass through this little electrical building. It's really a remnant of the old garage. We'd propose, if it's not, it would be great to be able to relocate that infrastructure somewhere else. If not, then to actually move a sidewalk off so that you're not routing people through the little building. And again, add a planting strip there to again create a more definite pathway. So we've thought about many other things that just get to be a little bit too complicated to be adding in here. We do know that the dumpsters are obviously an issue. What we'd recommend, and it really means really working with everybody, we've worked with other communities to consolidate the dumpsters in a few centralized areas where the dumpsters are actually screened by really nice fencing. That could just be a nice creative wood fencing, or it could be used for murals, and it could be part of the whole artwork process. But part of the issue is a lot of the sites that seem to be problematic are really on private property. So that needs to be a public-private partnership to work out the best locations for those dumpsters. So, and then Barry will get into more about logistics of implementing these.
I'm gonna come down here so folks will be having a look down there and over here. Okay. Hi, I'm Barry Abramson, Abramson Associates. I'm going to talk about sort of strategy for staged implementation, call it options, with short, mid, and long-term, and perhaps beyond long-term options. And those also track with how much things cost. The short-term things are things you can do fairly quickly and that really don't cost very much. And then at each stage, you sort of check in because they imply a sacrifice of some parking spaces, but you want to do that in a sequential way so that you're able to check your supply-demand situation and then see if you want to get a little more aggressive or not. So in the short term, one item that you could do is engage the community in rebranding of the basin area. We keep calling it the basin. That's not the name that you really want. You have a vision, I believe, and we certainly agree with you, that that should be more than just sort of a leftover space or a parking lot. It should be something more of a central location than that, even if it does include parking. And we'll have to leave to you how you engage yourselves in rebranding that, but coming up with an attractive name for it. Then in terms of some capital improvements, converting the north parking row, and that was the area. Would you flip back to the previous slide? Okay. The north parking row being this blue area. You've got a double-sided bay of parking there currently. There's about, I believe, 19 spaces on each side of that bay, on each side, with a access aisle in between. We're suggesting that you take the northernmost parking row and the access aisle, so that's approximately 40 feet, and convert it to a temporary park space in the short term. The other spaces that are remaining, which are here, can be accessed instead of from that central aisle, they can simply be accessed from over here, and be much more efficient. You can flip back here. Okay, thank you. That would not necessarily imply any cost or any significant cost. You would basically be maybe doing some painting of that surface, and with color pavement treatments. You could have planters, string lighting to make it obvious that it's more of a public common area. And you'd activate it with the kinds of things that you are already doing in town and perhaps other locations. Food trucks, cafe seating, maybe bocce, cornhole, what have you, beer garden. Make it an active place. Because right now, the basin parking and the commercial uses, particularly the restaurants that front on that, are fronting on a space that's totally unappealing, really. That would provide a focal point that would be visible where there is a more attractive, activated use happening, and it would benefit the entire basin area. We also suggest, very importantly, not just to focus on the basin, but to focus on your street frontages as well. You have the asset here of having some really great urban streets that have active commercial use. Would you come back again to the previous slide? Okay. This doesn't show the whole thing, but basically this is showing pretty much the areas that are activated in terms of your commercial street frontages. Mason is, for the length of it, pretty much an active commercial street. Main Street, up through this area and a little further to the food bank and the Pleasant Street Cafe, if I have that being right, is an activated street. And then you get beyond that, and a pedestrian is going too far, because you're going to Emerson Hospital, the new building has a dental office across the street, you're going around the corner, there's nothing really reinforcing as a pedestrian coming up on Summer until you get to the Fine Arts Theater. So one of the things that we feel is very important is providing an attractive pedestrian loop and reinforcing that pedestrian loop so that people really appreciate their downtown, not just focus on the basin, but also your street frontage. And that's why this central connection through this super block here, from basically the Fine Arts Theater down with a much more attractive sidewalk coming all the way through here, basically will create a pedestrian loop that people will want to do the whole circuit, with this being a central point that attracts them in and through. You can come back to the next slide. Sorry, I'm hopping back and forth with the regular two screens. So one thing that we can do, again, for relatively short money and on a temporary basis to test it out, is to introduce parklets on Main and Mason Streets. Parklets are those, I don't know if any of you have been, let's say, on Newbury Street. They've introduced them in the Back Bay in Boston, where they take a few parking spaces. They're not really doing anything physically to the street, but they're introducing a temporary cafe seating area that feels somewhat protected, you're not going to be driven into, and has cafe seating, and is an attractive spot, sometimes has some awnings, or planters and things like that. That will really reinforce what's going on Main Street and Mason Streets now. And we feel that's an important addition. You can add as many of those at a given time as you feel is appropriate, add to them over time, and see how you're doing in terms of parking supply and demand. The last thing, of course, is more of a organizational thing. Consider forming a Main Street organization. All these are short-term, relatively low-cost or no-cost options, and again, that first, I'm back one more before we get to Eversoft. Just to mention that first row of parking that's against the Memorial Park is approximately 19 spaces that you'd be losing if you introduce this temporary lower park area. And we're also suggesting that you perhaps, going forward, sacrifice a few spaces on the eastern side of the park, maybe about 10 spaces, to make a nicer walkway. But okay, so midterm. Let's say that we're satisfied that the temporary parking in that first 40 feet on the lower end of the park has not really hurt your parking situation. You're now going to want to work on some other things. And you could be doing this coterminously. You can start this process to try to improve the existing basin parking situation and related things. So make some improvements to the parking lot, widen the sidewalks that are going through it at key junctures, add lighting. You need lighting, certainly. In improving those pedestrian paths. Expand and improve wayfinding to the satellite parking and rail trail areas. We know that in suburban areas, people want to park right there, but we have to say in walking around and just walking through a mid-block to the rail trail, it's not that far. And you've got to attract it enough downtown that people will walk that one block, but you have to provide the wayfinding and the better lighting that will make that more appealing and realistic. You need to centralize your dumpsters instead of every building having its own dumpster. It looks terrible. There are things that can be done to centralize them into maybe a couple of locations. We were thinking perhaps the new hotel could be a site for that. It would require some coordination. We would also suggest that those be in some fashion dressed up so that they are, or camouflaged, so that they are more appealing. Existing walls, such as the wall that we're currently seeing separating you, that would now be the back of that temporary lower park area, as well as the handball court type of wall that was left over on the, which side, western side? You could have murals there, and frankly, you could have murals on some of the backs of other buildings. Some of them have active frontages of commercial uses. Others of them aren't that attractive. They may not be amenable to conducive to having commercial use, but perhaps some murals can make that more appealing. And perhaps local art students or folks from the art center would be thrilled to have the opportunity to do something like that. Another option in the midterm, if you've seen that you are willing to sacrifice and can live with that sacrifice of the first 19 spaces, would be to be a little bit more adventurous, get another 20 feet of depth to that lower park area, and take that other row, which I don't think I need to go back. It was a double loaded bay of parking. So you would take that other row of parking, expand your park area. On a temporary basis, see how that works. If it's workable, great. If not, you can say, okay, let's push it back. And then the last thing, just to say about planning, and more electric charging stations. Next, long term. Okay, so let's say that you've experimented with that, what is 38 parking spaces that you sacrificed, and because you have, and probably a few on the street also, if you've introduced some park huts and like that, let's say that you've been able to make that work. You've gotten better wayfinding to the satellite parking. Maybe you've actually been able to increase your satellite parking by making some deals with property owners down on River Street, is it River Street, I believe, where there is excess parking, but it's in private hands. At that point, maybe you say, okay, and hopefully you can find the money for this. Maybe you make that lower park expansion more permanent with green landscaping and with hardscaping. And you have a phenomenal opportunity to make that a better place than you can make it with just those temporary improvements. you can introduce, it's really not that great of a elevation, but currently that wall is all that you see when you're in the basin, that and the chain link fence above it, okay? You can make that into a tremendous asset by stepping down from the top of it, some of it with green slopes, some of it with steps that act as seating. And now if you're in the basin, you're really seeing the park and feeling the park, and all of a sudden that basin area becomes phenomenally more attractive. The other thing that's, flip back to the concept plan. The other thing I think that's phenomenally great opportunity here is this area where you have all these ramps, and you have there this very high wall could be altered so that you're actually sloping down, instead of sloping up, which it currently does, to a wall, you could slope down to the lower park area. And now you have a park that all works together. Everything is visible in terms of people feeling the connection to the Fine Arts Theater and up through that area and all around. And you've got something that really sings. Go back to our long term. Pretty much covered that. And then the last thing is, it'd be nice to have permeable paving treatments as an option. And then, if we dare, we didn't even put a picture to this next one, the bold vision in some future where you're feeling that, we're not needing as much parking as we did, is you replace the remainder of the basin with some type of piazza or park. That's probably a very long-term vision when people are not feeling they need as much parking. But it's a thought. At that point, I will turn it over to Christine Maddow, Medor of Mass Development, who will talk about the finance.
I'll stay where I am. I know I'm in the dark, but really quickly, there are funding and technical resources available to the community to continue your efforts in reimagining this area, Maynard Court / the basin. Through Mass Development, we have a program we call Commonwealth Places. It's kind of like a hybrid of crowdfunding and then Mass Development matches the funding that you generate through the project. And in order to do that, the community will submit an application for a specific placemaking project to activate a specific area. And that application is always rolling. That's available to you now. In terms of this other funding through the State Housing and Community Development program called the Downtown Initiative, that's also available to you to do some additional downtown studying, and they also, I believe, is looking into this parking benefit district tool that many communities are starting to take note as an alternative to a business improvement district that requires state approval. And then MassDOT, the typical Chapter 90 program for infrastructure investments. And we understand that you are also a CPA community, that funding is always available to you. It's kind of like a democratizing how you want to use your tax dollars to benefit, whether it's open space or recreational space, historic preservation, or community housing, which I believe doesn't apply to this project specifically, but that's funding that's readily available to you. And then MAPC, your regional planning agency, is available to provide you with technical assistance. And lastly, there's always community banks that are taking interest in community projects, and that's also available as a short-term opportunity. And who's that for?
Second, we want to take the time with the lights on, I guess, to answer some of your questions and discussion.
Could you speak up a little?
The temperature in that space, unless I'm making this up, for me, it's just a baby island of heat and water.
the other thing I've seen in some parking areas is solar panels above the parking stations that might also provide shade because for parking lot vehicle charging. So I just think the temperature, I think, is a real concern in this spot. If you're placemaking and trying to attract people, I'm not doing it because I'm just required.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I think there's sort of integral with some of the thought trying to get high wall with slope in that area, kind of slow. We did show more like, but we didn't discuss slope and shade all.
Some of the impervious surface improvements can help that as well. Do you want to manage this?
Yeah, sure. If you wanna- Sure, the mic.
Hello. With a lot of these projects, I'm curious in general, you talk about the impervious surfaces, the new walkways and different design of the roads. Like, do you ever consult like the DPW and those types of organizations to make sure that like snow removal is going to be okay and the places to put things and the right equipment and the right width and all that sort of thing? You do. You're saying yes. Good.
No, and that's part of it.
Certainly in the design, once you get into specific design, you would obviously do that.
Okay.
No,
Good.
DPW is part of our discussion.
Great.
Dick Downey, the Economic Development Committee. I was wondering what kind of experience you folks had with working with merchants to get the doors facing what we call the plaza, what we call the Mason, get people to come in from that direction rather than going to Main Street. Would that be beneficial? And if it would be, how would you go about enticing people to make those kinds of improvements?
Often it's a security issue with merchants that they don't want to have the two entrances. But I think part of our philosophy in trying to make the pedestrian pathways more cohesive in the basin area was to facilitate creating those rear-facing entrances, to create the sense of village in there so that you would encourage folks to have entrances front and back, or front or back. You know, you kind of have a mixture now with a few businesses only facing into the basin. Ideally, you would make both the retail streets and the interior streets within the basin retail shopping streets. You create a little village there.
On the financing side, I'm sure it's going to cost extra money to do that. Some communities will use facade improvement grants. Other communities that I've seen will offer what we call tenant fit-out grants. So if it's an issue interior to the building, you might use a tenant fit-out grant. If it's an issue exterior to the building, you might use a facade improvement grant program. So more of a carrot than a stick to try to get them to do that dual entrance. Thank you.
It's something those beep grants that Bill was talking about could conceivably fund. Is that right, Bill?
Yes.
A couple things kind of strike me. There's talk of a reduction in the parking spots of what looks like about 19 to 35 spaces between the two areas next to the park. And I'm not really seeing anything, there wasn't too much discussion of flow. In fact, from one of the ultimate looks, it almost looked like there's a proposal to almost split the two parking areas into two distinct areas. I may be misinterpreting the hand-drawn sketch a little bit on that. So in terms of percentage of reduction, what is that 19 to 35 translate to, and really addresses the flow issues that are in that parking area.
Looking to your overall parking supply on and off street, it's about 10%, under 10%. You have about 500 spaces.
But in that immediate area.
Within the immediate area, it's more like 15 to 20%. I think you have close to 200 spaces in there within the basin. I think the idea was to, it wasn't to separate the parking to make them all managed separately. You would still be able to access the different areas of the lot, but just to make the access more coherent so that people coming from Summer Street, for example, could easily be directed to park in that lot there near Summer Street, and likewise from Nason Street and Main Street. To cut down the access points to the lot over by the hotel, for example, we kind of envision that street next to the hotel as a pedestrian access only, and possibly activated by the hotel with cafe seating or that kind of thing. So it's really a matter of simplifying the access and making it more clear. Because we're hearing from people that the parking is haphazard, it's a hodgepodge, you know, the pavement, it's unclear where you're supposed to go, pedestrians don't know where to go. So we were trying to address that with clear pedestrian paths and then a clear idea of where the parking areas are.
Yeah, I was just concerned because of the haphazard nature. It's, you know, while improving the pedestrian flows, when you're, you know, making sure that the vehicle transportation, flow is, you know, is improved because
Right.
that's also a mess. Was there any consideration to perhaps moving the Summer Street exit to a different, you know, further down towards the 2762 intersection at all, or is that working with the current access point straight across from?
You know, we were working with that access point. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting from the observations of the parking supply and demand is that the on-street parking is more heavily used at night and off-street parking less so. And I think part of that is due to the perceived security problems and lack of lighting. So I think it would be helpful to the restaurants and so on, and to the movie theater to get that lot better lit and get those pathways defined so that people can really use that lot at night and feel safe and secure there.
You referred to the hotel, I'm not sure everybody here knows what that is or where that's proposed. You might want to talk about that.
We had under,
Yeah, so that's the old Bank of America building, and the current owner is kicking around ideas to make it. At the moment, still, it's just a good idea.
How many units is he proposing to put in there?
There is no proposal.
There's no proposal at this time. There has been a little talk of them doing a very small boutique style hotel, but no proposal has been submitted at this point.
Hi there. First of all, thank you for participating in this and spending our day. You can't all hear me? No. We're recording too, so make sure that's here.
So thank you again for spending the entire day in our town and looking around and coming up with these great ideas. For the immediate goal, the first section that you talked about the parking spaces, my concern is the flow of the traffic in and out of Naylor Court. I mentioned it earlier this morning, and I did not see that addressed on the immediate use. If we can't get in and out of it, that's a big problem. So I wanted to hear any thoughts that you had during your discussion about how we can fix immediately. There's one access out by Citizens Bank, and there's one access in by as we call it, the Bicos, currently. And that's it when you're coming off of Main Street. Nason, excuse me, Nason, thank you.
So you're saying that access by the park is only one way in?
So
One
you're
way
in
out.
if you're in Maynard Court and you want to leave, you can only come out by Citizens Bank,
Okay,
up the hill. And then if you are on Nason Street, if you want to go into the parking lot to park, you can only come in by the very narrow passway that's Babico's. This is again from Nason Street. Main Street has a little better, Azucar, the restaurant, and the dollar store. You can get in and out through there. And Summer Street. But Nason Street, as you mentioned earlier, is a big commercial strip, as is Main Street. And very limited access in and out.
is that wide enough to make that two-way there
No.
by the park? Not wide enough.
Not with the bank there, because it has a driver car.
Yeah, the drive-through window. Well, without ruffling too many feathers, I would recommend getting rid of the drive-through window, which is an abomination in any kind of a downtown area. That's my 2 cents, you know? And, you know, I would get rid of that and make it a two-way entrance in and out for everybody. You know, if you want to have pedestrian traffic in your downtown, and if most of the people are walking, and this is your local residents and so on, get rid of the drive-through. I'm sorry we didn't put that in the recommendation, but that's my personal recommendation.
Another thought, that if you went towards the longer-term strategy of dealing with the park, is you could widen the access area by cutting into what's currently that ramp in the park. Which, a brand new ramp that frankly, in the long-term option, we were suggesting sloping that whole area down to meet the lower park area. And while you're in the process of doing that, you can widen the access area.
But if
But
it's,
other than that, you know, you're talking about what, knocking down buildings or preventing a private property owner who wants to expand into some current access routes with building from doing that. And maybe that's an option that can be discussed with them, but that's what they want to do. So.
And I'm just wondering, I mean, because you do have the two-way access on Summer Street, which is just right around the corner. I mean, is it a real traffic problem to go out that one and make a left-hand
Well,
turn?
because it's a one-way street to Mesa, you come down on Summer and take a right, and now you gotta do a big loop through the whole of town.
You can take a left off of, when you exit Summer Street, you can go left and then left again on East.
If you come out by Fine Arts and then just go up a little bit at the end of Veterans Park and turn left.
well, ideally, you'd want to have, from the point of view of creating these coherent vehicular paths through the site, we want to have in and out on each street. So I would recommend working very nicely with the bank on removing that drive-through window. I bet you they don't do a heck of a lot of business on the drive-through anyway. It's mostly local people. That's my theory.
Hey there, Denise Shea. So this question that was brought up actually brings up a greater concern that I'm not sure if anybody had mentioned to you. There is often a problem of people driving the wrong way on Main Street, somewhere between where Azucar is and the triangle, the traffic triangle. I'm sitting in Serendipity, and there are often cars that are suddenly coming the wrong way, and they use the triangle like some kind of rotary And it's terrifying, and if you ask the people at Serendipity, they tell you it happens every week. So there's something wrong with the way it's got signs or the way it flows. There's something very dangerous happening. I'm not sure if people are taking a left out of McDonald's. I'm not sure if they're taking a right out of the basin area. I just don't know.
Well, I think one thing that we didn't stress in this presentation was the idea of widening sidewalks on Main Street and narrowing the roadway, which will help control speeds and help with the direction of traffic too, I believe. Creating bike lanes, wider sidewalks.
I'm sorry, a little follow-up, but I do love all this. When she was mentioning the in and out access and that sort of thing, it made me think like signage would really help with that. I don't often drive downtown, but if I'm in an area where I don't know, I'm looking for parking, it's like I'm looking for those parking signs. And I'm not sure that in and out access on Mason Street is extremely blind. The bank building blocks the sidewalks. You can't see past it. So if you're driving up that hill, it's very difficult to see who's there, and your car's going uphill. So expanding that to be two-way, like I feel like the other entrance and exits are much more visible, although the one on Main's not super visible either. So personally, I feel like I would close the bank one entirely and just put up better signage, make that sidewalk much more continuous, let them drive around Main. Yeah, I don't know, that was it, but all these are great ideas.
Yeah.
And what Denise is saying is, yeah, I think they're coming straight across from 27. I see them doing all the time.
We had kind of floated the suggestion of making Main Street two-way again. I don't know how people feel about that.
You know, one thing that in the rush of putting this presentation together didn't quite come through in the slides that this comment reminds me of. My initial reaction was, well, maybe you need a policeman, once in a while. But was the issue of enforcement as relates to parking as well. Because one of the things that we heard was that nobody ever gets a ticket. There's some of the spaces, 2-hour spaces, nobody ever gets a ticket for park fill all day, which we feel probably contributes to the parking problem in this town. If it's like any other downtown that we've looked at, the business owners and tenants all park right in there, next as close as they can, as anybody would, right, to their store or business, and then they complain that there's not enough parking for their customers. If you had 2-hour parking and you had enforcement in the Port Basin, then some of the business owners and their tenants would park at more of a satellite location, and you might find that you do have enough parking generally. It's just that folks only have to walk a couple of blocks. That's not totally popular with everybody who would there be enough of everything without any hassle, but that is, a possibility. And also, while you're at it, a policeman, once in a while, you give a ticket for driving along.
I just want to add that we focused a lot of our discussion and attention on parking and circulation, but during the stakeholder interviews throughout the morning, we also heard that there's a real pent-up need for the arts and culture community to really shine in Maynard, because there are many artists who live or who work, especially in the downtown, and that there's a lot of activity to support that kind of a creative economy that the town is not really tapping fully into. And also additionally to that is that there's a real need for a civic center, for activity in the center of Maynard where people can get together and celebrate Maynard and celebrate your downtown, which is already very active and vibrant and is the envy of your surrounding neighbors who all come here to go to yoga classes or to go to art space or go to your festivals, and that's an opportunity that cannot be ignored. And it's really easy to just focus on these parking spaces or circulation, but also the potential there is just enormous. And we're all talking about trade-offs, about losing parking spaces and maybe activating the space for more valuable uses. And I think that's really important for the town to think about as we move forward past our exercise today. We will have a fuller report after this presentation, but we were really short on time. We didn't really get to highlight some of those discussion in our presentation, but there's a really great opportunity to make downtown really authentic and unique and a place where people want to come to as a destination, where you can really generate a lot of economic activity that benefits the town. So I hope we don't leave here tonight just thinking about parking and traffic, and there's a lot more that can come out of discussion after tonight. So I just want to add that, make sure we don't forget to discuss that.
I was just curious, during your discussions, did anyone talk about Maynard Crossing? Because the reason I think of it is, I've always thought that the basin spot should be a park, the whole thing. And I'm probably unpopular for that. But in the sense of maybe encouraging things like banks and laundromats to move to Maynard Crossing and eliminate some of the need for parking in that space, and then you put more civic center-minded, an ice cream shop, a beer garden, those types of things. Is there any sort of incentive that the town could do to kind of maybe get some of those businesses to embrace the new area down the street?
That would kind of be a first in urban redevelopment push businesses out of downtown.
I don't know how you make a park
So no, we
space
haven't
without
thought of
kind
that,
of,
frankly.
I mean, I'm thinking of a person who goes to the laundromat, obviously they're carrying their laundry, they want to park in front of the laundromat. I don't know how you give up that space without getting that business to kind of go somewhere else.
So, I'm with her. We are talking about parking because there's going to be people that there's still a desire, there's still a need for it, so we still have to kind of locate that somewhere. But I was hearing some great ideas about using the River Street lot. I know the town owns it. We purchased it a few years ago, and there's more access to there's other options there in River Street. How do we get people to know that those are there? There was a Board of Selectmen meeting that I sat in, I don't remember when, and a gentleman presented very much what you were saying. He'd done a study, and I don't know if you have access to it. Would essentially, I remember the conclusion was like, the people that are using the parking that is near the businesses are the employees of those businesses. And they were like, well, so we don't actually need to change anything, they're parking too close. So I don't know what we would do to discourage those sorts of things, or just to get them to utilize the River Street lot more, so that to move those spaces around, or to open up so we could reduce spaces in the basin area.
If you implement some of these more modernized parking management tools, the different kinds of meters and kiosks and that kind of thing, you can designate the areas by time limit, so that you have the areas closest to the shops be the shortest term, and then the longest term, say at River Street. So, through your parking authority, you can start to get a grip on how all those spaces are used, and then put in some of these new tools to really fine-tune your parking management. And then that will help you get away with fewer spaces, because people will know where to park. They'll know right away where the movie theater is, and they'll know right away, where to park for the shops, whatever. So, and I gather there is a wayfinding plan in the process of being implemented. The signs have been ordered or are being manufactured, so help is on the way as far as the wayfinding is concerned.
But nice, just make a comment.
This is more for traffic flow than anything. I don't know if anyone mentioned it to you today, but we have an alternative to Nason Street, and it's called the parking behind the outdoor store. So people come in at CVS and go through, not to park, but just to go through, to avoid going all the way around, because everything is one way downtown. And I just mentioned that to you, may want to take it into consideration, when you're planning, talking traffic and pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic, in that many people, myself included, will just go through and out back and then come around. But it's all part of an issue downtown, the way the traffic flows or doesn't.
Could you speak a little bit about the River Street parking? How many spots there are now? And I've never parked there, and frankly, what little I know of it, as a woman, you wouldn't catch me in a million years walking alone at night from River Street to anywhere in Maynard. So if you think that people are going to use those at night, you better make them more secure before you take away any spaces in the basin.
Those are maybe 31, thank you. It's just 31 spaces, and I think the town has plans in the works to put lighting down there already to try to address some of the safety issues.
Isn't there a parking lot across the street from it?
Behind the buildings that front Main Street, yeah, so it sits back behind, on the other side of the street from that too. So it is a little bit out of the way, but I think some of the points that were mentioned earlier about what do you do about employee parking, I mean, so much of it comes down to a monetary decision. If you're an hourly employee working at the bakery and you can park for free right now right in front of the bakery, what is your incentive to go to the River Street lot and park for your 6 or 8 hour shift? But if the town starts charging you and you're getting tickets, or you gotta go leave your shift to move your car every hour, all of a sudden you're gonna start to think, maybe I should take up the sort of incentive that the town's offering or that my employer is offering and move my car literally a 3-minute walk, 500 feet down the street where I can park and nobody's gonna hassle me. So I think Barry did a really nice job presenting some of the sort of incremental, short-term, temporary things, and just making sure that you're testing solutions along the way. A lot of these things don't cost a ton of money. It requires the town to, work closely with the businesses and leadership in the downtown. But there's so many things that you could test, try it out, measure it, come back to it. Did it work? Did it not? If it worked, great. Let's move to the next thing and keep going down the line.
Some of it, like the lighting, which was the #1 recommendation that we heard from people today, can really go a long way at easing some of the times when you do have shortages. Like, we heard about people going around and around the block looking for restaurant parking where there's parking available within the basin. So if you light that area and make it safe and make the pedestrian links to Main Street and Mason Street more clear, it makes it easier for people to just go right there at night and park going to a restaurant without going around and around the block. So I think that you have enough capacity so that, typically you wouldn't need to park down on River Street at night. That's an overflow location for employees, we had thought, or during big events when streets are closed or whatever.
I was at the 10 o'clock this morning, and it was really sweet to hear how enthused everybody is about Maynard. I'm really thrilled to hear that you listened and put a lot of the preserved green space and tried to find some way to make this a unique town. I think that that's the thing that we most need to strive for. I think right now we have great opportunity. When the mill was full, Main Street was one way all the way across, no parking, because it was a 20-minute wait at the light. And a lot of us forget that. And when the town does fill up more, we have to really think about these parking issues. But right now we don't have to. And right now what we want to do is build a town that has a place where people can go. If there were really great sidewalks that connect all these places, the river parking won't be so distant. If people got used to parking there, it wouldn't seem so odd. I know that in Concord, New Hampshire, They put resident plates on everybody's car who worked or lived in downtown Concord, New Hampshire, and said, you have to park in the designated residents-only spot. There's always going to be enough room, but you cannot park in front of your business, and you can't park in front of your home. And it worked really well, except after certain hours. And it worked really well to keep those slots open for the quick drive-throughs. We're going to be competing against the commons, you know, like that place downtown. We are not going to have people coming here to shop. We're going to have people coming here for an experience. They need to have a place to park and a place where there's a place to be. And I think that safe walking and safe green spaces and exciting places are really what you guys nailed on to. Give up a few parking spots, no big deal. We have them in town right now. Anyway, thank you. I think you did a really good job.
We've got to wrap it up for our panel. They've been going all day. We have time to take one more question from the board.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to ULI and to Mass Development for all their efforts today. We really appreciate it. I appreciate all the details that Barry put into the incremental steps, and I think that's really good for us to see. And this may already be part of the plan, but I'd really like to see that same level of concept and detail for that Go Bold vision. And the vision would really help us to be able to understand where we can take this. And that bold vision would be great if it had multiple concepts, multiple options for us to view and see, so that we can have vision and direction on how we can take this in the future. So I'm sure it is part of your plan, but I just want to make sure that that would be my expectation, that your report would have that same level of considerations and detail for vision. Is that fair?
And I think with that, our panelists have been here all day. Thank you. Thank you.
We should have a report in about 12 weeks, as Michelle had referenced.